to the Optimized Equine Podcast. I am Tamara and Barrett, and in this episode, my co-host Vanessa and I will tell you a little bit about ourselves and what we do for horses and their humans. As we tend to do, we end up down some rabbit holes, such as how optimization is about meeting the needs of the whole horse, not just in training, but in all aspects of their day-to-day life, care, and handling. We also talk about how the equine mind and the body must both be fully engaged to achieve mutually beneficial results with happy humans and happy horses working together. Then we spend some time pondering, are we acting as prison guards or teachers to our horses? I think we all know who we would personally choose to spend time with. And then we dive on over to the evolution of self and how, if we let them, horses can teach us so much about letting go of resistance and just about life itself. And then we have a little bit of a detour over to treats and positive reinforcement training, which can be a really good thing, but sometimes it's used in a way that it becomes a distraction to the horse's true challenges. Sometimes it's used in a way to avoid all mental discomfort, which is actually a disservice to the horse and their learning. And we discuss the importance of physical and mental stillness and why so many horses out there seem to lose the ability to be still and stand quietly. And then we discuss the other side of this, how some horses become so still and internalized that they lose their ability to access any athletic power in a useful or relaxed and functional way. So without further ado, let's dive right in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Well, Vanessa.
Yes.
Tell me all about you. Tell me about yourself.
Okay. Well, I am an equine osteopath and Masterson Method practitioner and instructor. I became obsessed with helping horses via the Bodywork route when I was living actually in Denton, Texas. And I worked for the Convention and Visitor Bureau, and they put on these horse country tours, basically showcasing the horse industry in Denton County, which is huge. There's a lot of reiners and cutters, a lot of performance horse trainers out there. And somehow or another, I stumbled upon a Jim Masterson technique in, I can't remember what book I was reading, but I was so addicted to the horse's response to my touch, and this is the bread and butter of his technique and his method, that I wanted to go through the certification course and get certified. So I did that, and I got certified in 2012. And then I started teaching for the Masterson Method weekend seminars a couple years later, and then ended up doing advanced 5 days as well. Around that time, I just kind of wanted more, to learn more. And so a good friend of mine named Lori Mueller, who is actually also an equine osteopath and Masterson Method practitioner and instructor, used to instruct. She lives in Texas, and she was telling me about this program, the Vlugan Institute for Equine Osteopathy and Education. And I just have to say, Lori is incredible. She does dissections and anatomy courses. The name of her business is Trinity Equine. She was really a mentor to me, and I just, her level of education and knowledge is just so up here. Anywho, I enrolled in that program, and it was really amazing. It was really different from a lot of other body work modalities out there. Osteopathy, in a nutshell, is helping the body to self-heal by removing blockages not only in the nervous system, but the vascularity as well. Traditional osteopathy also includes craniosacral training and craniosacral techniques. And we also learned about the visceral system, so the internal organs, and how, for instance, gut issues could create musculoskeletal and fascial restrictions in the body. And so the Masterson method is wonderful about trying to find primary issues like feet, teeth, saddle fit, potentially internal issues that are creating compensation patterns in the horse that keeps coming back again and again, even though you've worked on them. Well, the osteopathy just took that to a whole nother level for me. And the techniques that you use in osteopathy can range from anywhere from soft fascial, what we call indirect osteopathic techniques, to more structural techniques that you would associate with like what a chiropractor is doing. But we do those a little differently. So, it really just depends on the horse that's in front of you, what their particular issues are, their age, what's appropriate technique-wise for that horse. So I actually graduated top of my class in 2017. And after that, had a really amazing apprenticeship for a few years that allowed me to really see and be a part of advanced osteopathy treatment, especially in relation to the teeth and the TMJ. And I've continued my education through postgraduate fashion canine courses. I have taken a couple of Barrett courses. Barrett is the godfather, if you will, of visceral osteopathy. He's a French osteopath, Jean-Pierre Barrett, who has created an institute and training for professionals to get more into nerve release, which he pioneered as well, in the visceral system. And I got the chance recently to spend some time with Dr. Sandy Howlett, who is out of Canada, or Nova Scotia, I should say. I can't say enough good things about her. She's incredible and amazing, and she is the craniosacral person. So that's where we're at. So I work in Arizona, and I go around and I work on horses, and I'm just really grateful to have had all of the training that I've had, and really have been blessed to have so many mentors and just amazing practitioners in my life that I will give credit to any day of the week, because it's not so much coming from me, it's coming from all these wonderful people around me, and I'm just trying to be a conduit for that healing process. But yeah, I can talk a little more about osteopathy if you want to. There are some other kind of tenets of what that is. People in America don't know exactly what osteopathy is because we have DOs in the human world that kind of act as doctors. And some of them don't do the osteopathic manipulation techniques, some do. But I was trained by a European osteopath. And so again, what that means is there's a little bit more of a tradition there. Even though osteopathy was created by Dr. Andrew Taylor Still here in America, in Missouri, actually in the late 1800s, much of the tradition, in my opinion, has kind of gravitated towards the European model of training, again, where you're looking at all of those systems, musculoskeletal, visceral, and craniosacral. And unfortunately, there's a lot of osteopathy schools in the world that just look at the musculoskeletal, so maybe you have to go get your craniosacral training somewhere else, and then the visceral part of it may not even be in the curriculum. But I was very blessed to be in a program where we really looked at all of those things, and like I said, had that apprenticeship too, where I was really exposed to the networking and collaboration of the vet, who you need, the osteopath, the dentist, the farrier, and the trainer. So I really got to see in real time what treating the whole horse looked at. And then the most important thing, honestly, is what you do. You, Tamara, what you do after we work on that horse to get them moving properly, and in a way that doesn't hurt them anymore, because we've taken away some of those restrictions and tensions, and then you can move them through a range of motion that's going to be functional for their anatomy and biomechanics.
I think that segues perfectly into
Fabulous.
how I met you, which is, I think, because we won't dive into that specific way yet, but it's because I was looking to I wanted help for these horses that was in alignment with what I was doing. I feel like so often it's not to say bad things about the vets, because like you said, you need the vets, but we all have to be on the same page to get anywhere. anywhere. Otherwise, it's all these different forces acting on the horse, and they don't have an aligned goal. And I feel like, that was a thing that the one particular horse led me to you, but so many other horses after him, it's like you'd have the farrier saying one thing, you have the vet saying another thing, we're doing this other thing, and none of those things really jive. Anyway, so I was ultimately, I was told by my good friend and mentor, Patrick King, you need to find someone from the Vlugan Institute. And I'm sure he has a story to tell about why he said that. But he said that, and that is what made me hunt you down. And luckily, there was someone in Tucson from the Vlugan Institute.
That's right.
But before we'll get back to how I met you on my little story there. But I did have a question, and that was, where in your journey did you leave your job with Denton County and become a full-time practitioner? Where did that happen?
Oh, good question. I wish some of my Denton peeps were listening, because they were so wonderful to me. They really nurtured that passion that I had found for horses when I was there prior to 2012. But actually, Lisa Haldane, who is a Masterson Method practitioner and also used to be an instructor, is a very, very good cutting horse rider and a wonderful body worker. And she actually gave me the opportunity to move to Tucson and work for her as a loper, and kind of helping manage and do whatever she needed for her cutting horses. So I moved here in 2012 to do that, and started working on horses full time. I only worked for her maybe a couple years at the most, but Lisa really gave me a great foundation, and I hadn't honestly had any prior immersion into any kind of performance horse world. But the cutting horse world, what those horses do, I will always have a special place in my heart for cutting horses. They're just really spectacular. And so she gave me the opportunity to ride these really nice cutting horses. And she made me take dressage lessons with a trainer here in Tucson named Kathy Schreiber, who I also think is just fantastic. And so she just really gave me a great foundation. Now, do I ride anymore? No. My mare is 27 and she just lives her life. But I think that, I think a lot of potential horse clients out there do appreciate if you have some experience riding as well as working on horses, because there is some overlap there between, like, oh, well, why isn't the horse taking his lead, or why is he swapping leads, or yada yada. Now I'm really down here when it comes to putting those things together, because I don't have as much experience as some other people do with riding, but I know enough to kind of put together some basic things. And then I just defer to you guys, because what you're doing, if I must say, is you're a trainer in mobility. And veterinarians, for instance, are trained in pathology. And I in a way am also trained in mobility, but kind of, as we talked about last time, more kind of static mobility, where I'm really looking at one joint, seeing how that's moving, and then trying to put a whole picture together. You're looking at the whole movement system. And so that's where we can all fit really, really well together. Again, if we can get on the same page, be on the same team about helping the horse, because it's not just one method. It's not just one person that's going to help that horse. It's a whole team approach.
Mm-hmm. And everyone's method, whether you're a vet or a trainer or whatever, everyone's method, at least in my opinion, needs to be adjustable to that horse. I want every horse to reach a certain standard, but how we get there, gosh, are so many ways, so many unique ways.
Right.
And I think if you don't have people on your team that feel that same way, it's like they're just, this is how we do it, this is what, and it doesn't work. We can't get on the same page because their page is too small.
Right, right. It'd be really disingenuous for me to say that I can fix something like EPM or head shaking, for instance, because those are, one, pathologies to a degree that the vet needs to diagnose. But number two, if we're talking about EPM, we might need some medication, we might need some immunity boost, and then after that horse has gained some of that postural strength back, we need you to move that horse correctly. Head shaking, for instance, you know what I need more than anything? I need a good dentist. And so, like you said, you really have to tailor what you're doing for the individual horse. And I just love the idea, the concept, and maybe Yannick Vlugan said, he probably said this in one of our classes, and this is where I'm getting it from. The training and mobility is so important, but that's not necessarily what the vet does, right? But if we're having lameness issues or just presentation of behaviors that might indicate a pain issue or an acute injury or some structural change, we have to bring the vet in, but then the mobility part has to be there too, right? So it just all goes together.
Yeah. Well, I'll back up a little and tell a little bit about me and how.
Yes. Oh gosh. See, I didn't even ask. Too much coffee.
It's fine.
Please tell me all about you. You better get your coffee. I got mine. Oh, okay. Oh, good.
Yes. Anywho. So how did I decide to hunt down Vanessa? Well, we'll start with Barnaby. We might as well start with Barnaby, back up, and come back to Barnaby. I had this amazing horse named Barnaby who really was a catalyst, a big catalyst in my, I guess you could say, my career. Horses weren't always my career, obviously. I was a horse person from forever.
But you were doing a lot of competition. Yeah?
Yeah.
Tell me about that, too.
I started showing when I was 6. And,
wow.
So I'd been bothering my mom for lessons as long as I could, as long as she told me about it. I don't remember. Bothering her for lessons. They happened to start me up at this place that did mostly, quarter horse stuff, did open shows and things like that. So that's what we did. I had been taking some lessons there, 6 years old. We got ready to go to our first horse show in Walk Jog, and it's where it started. So in those kind of shows, it's like you got your Western, you got your English, you got your trail, you got your showmanship, have this nice little well-rounded experience, and that's what I did for a while. Ultimately switched to hunter jumpers, and that was where I, did most of my things, and most of my competing was in the hunter jumper land. So I did that through my junior years until I became an adult and went to school and all that good stuff. Never without horses, but that's kind of where the competition stuff took a pause there. Did the real job, which is why I was asking about your real job, because I think we all learn important things doing that real non-horse job for a little while, and then ended up back working at the facility that I grew up showing out of. So, when I was a junior rider, I showed out of this barn. I taught little kid lessons and pony camps and stuff like that, went off to school, and then basically got recruited back in to fill a position, and that's when I started my official full-time professional horse training career. So did that for many years, working mostly, like I said, in hunter jumper, equitation. Did that for a while, and then, long story short, this beautiful little black horse was born at this facility where I worked for a while, and so I bought him, and I think that was the first time that I really was like, dang, I want to do this different. which kind of sounds bad to say. You should always be trying to get better. I would have said prior to him, of course, I'm always trying to better my horsemanship. I'm always learning, and I take a clinic every year when they come to my barn and all this stuff. But really, was I like really diving in and learning? No, not really. I was just doing hunter jumpers and getting little bits of advice here and there. So anyway, that horse kind of, I didn't love how I had handled a previous horse I had that was born on my property. And so this was my chance to do it different. So I kind of dived in randomly to the land of horsemanship. And at the time, there was someone at the barn who introduced me to Warwick Schiller. And that was like my first peek outside of hunter jumper land. Honestly, I would say that was the first time I actually learned new stuff, truly new stuff. So I just kind of dived down this, turned out to be a huge rabbit hole of different information, and you learn all the different ways to do the things that I was doing in hunter jumper land. You know, there's you learn how there's so many different facets, and we're in some ways we're all going for the same goal, and in some ways we're all doing the same stupid stuff I came to learn. So as I kept going on down this horsemanship trail, I'm of course doing it to teach Barnaby all these amazing things and be the best horse mom I can, and I just wanted to, he was, you know, a well-bred warm blood, so my plan was to raise him, start it myself, do it all just perfectly, and go do hunter jumpers and dressage and working equitation on this little dream child that I had there. And so anyway, I learned so much, and in the process basically discovered that I didn't want to be doing what I was doing anymore in the hunter jumper circles. I learned kind of how bad it was, honestly. Not that it's the only circle of not great horse stuff going on. I learned that's also going on everywhere, but that was
and every
every discipline has its wow. I'm not sure that that's a great idea in retrospect, but anyway, ended up leaving and starting my own facility, basically my own boarding and training place. That's Oasis Equestrian. I started that in 2015, and initially the idea was to do hunter jumpers my way, you know, the right way, not so poorly. But you know, again, that was kind of the initial takeoff, and again, the more I dove on down that path, I realized, it's not that hunter jumpers wasn't for me, but there was, you know, Barnaby was just a baby still. I had these clients that had other horses coming to me, and they may want to do hunter jumpers. They maybe were already doing hunter jumpers, and they wanted to do it better, just like I did. Well, that turns into a very big rabbit hole of trying to, you don't want to use all these training gadgets, you don't want to drug the horses, you don't want to tire them out, you don't want unnecessary wear and tear. Well, the way to actually do hunter jumpers and not have all those things is not that easy, and every horse that came in the door, if the goal was to go do hunter jumpers well on this new standard of what well was, it wasn't possible. They needed to basically be rehabilitated because they were so messed up from being ridden and handled and housed and all of that in a way that's traditional. So it's like, it was like, yeah, I'm going to do hunter jumpers and dressage and working equitation, and then everything that would come in was broken. You know, it just seemed like every horse would come was broken once you started to see it with this new lens, you know. So it's not that I intentionally distanced myself from hunter jumpers and performance sports. It just kind of happened when I said, well, this is the standard I need the horses to get to. Well, none of them got there. Next thing you know, now I'm basically a rehabilitator. I'm basically a problem horse trainer, which, you know, that that also was partly from working with Ulrich Schiller and like hosting some clinics and just getting that association. He had certainly more problem horse people being drawn in than hunter jumper people. So that's kind of where my career made a big shift away from, I'm doing this performance horse thing to I'm just doing horses and trying to do it well. But as it turns out, once getting that rehabilitative thing, like I said, they all needed rehabilitating and kind of find their way back to neutral. I know neutral is a thing we said we were going to talk about many times here, but the horses were so far from neutral that sort of became like the thing. Get horses to be neutral and not having all these negative tensions and things stuck in their bodies and in their behaviors when you're trying to do stuff with them. And then that, once they're there, then you can do anything with that horse. You can do whatever you want to do, hunter jumper, this, that, recreational, trail riding, whatever. The horse becomes comfortable and sound and happy and all these things, then you can do whatever you feel like. So that's kind of my big journey. I help riders of, like I said, all different disciplines. I don't think that much about the discipline that they're in. Like on one hand, it's always in my mind what their goal is, but at the end of the day, I know that my goal fits into any discipline. So I just stick with my goal, and whatever type of horse you show up with and tack you use and what you're doing on the weekends is kind of your deal. I may tell you how what you're doing is causing problems that are in your own way, but at the end of the day, I believe I can help anyone in any discipline, because it's kind of that finding neutral, finding optimal, not just movement. I mean, optimal movement is a huge part of a horse. Without it, they're not a whole horse. So that is a big thing. But it's optimal everything. Optimal living, optimal friends. I want them to have, you can't just do kind, good training. You're only training them an hour a day at most.
Right.
Like you have to look at their whole life, and that's where all the good stuff comes from. Is meeting all their needs in all their different ways, and seeing how easy. We all different disciplines, different riders have these different goals of what they want to do with their horse. Even if that goal is purely recreational, it's still they want to do it safely. They want to have fun. They want to go do it. So that's.
And I appreciate that about you, because it's not just the training part. It's the how they're managed, how they're fed, how they're socialized. There's a lot of talk about mental health these days in athletes, which is a really key piece. But I think it ties into what you're saying too, because at the end of the day, for the horse to go and do anything, their mental health has to be in a certain place to where they're, for the most part, comfortable, willing. Like you said, there may be tension in their body that they need to go and do whatever they're going to do, but it's not abnormal tension. And so, you have this way of looking at the horse that isn't just piecemeal. And again, gives you a horse, like you say, in neutral, and a horse that, like I said, is willing, behavior-wise, can show you that they want to interact. And really and truly, if we're advocating for the horses, that has to be the starting point for anything, for any discipline. The jumping, you talking about the jumping horses made me think of something that I learned also at the Vlugan Institute. And I know that a lot of hunter jumper trainers, obviously incorporate flat work as an integral part. It's not just jumping. And of course, you can speak way on more on that than I can. What I love is that you're also incorporating the groundwork too. But the jumping for a horse can be very straining on their sacroiliac joints, mostly because their pelvis is oblique. It's not straight like a human or a dog. Dogs are way more made, in a sense, structure-wise, to jump than horses are. Now, horses do all kinds of things that you could say they're not meant to do. But the jumping can be a lot of strain on the SIs because of why I just mentioned the anatomy of their pelvis. And it's also a lot of concussion on their front end. And when they're jumping, they're really kind of hyperextending that hind end. So, unless there is a concerted effort to get them to really lift their back and do all the things we know are good for their bodies that aren't going to wear them down, like lifting their thoracic inlet area, lifting their back, using their hind end, open throat latch. Unless you're making a concerted effort to encourage those things, the jumping is going to degrade them. Sorry, it is, if that's all you're focusing on. And so, sorry, I hope that's okay. I say all that. I just had that thought from what I had learned in school about, again, how horses are doing all kinds of things that they're technically not supposed to do, but it's what we do in the other time, in the other hours, to not only strengthen their bodies, give them that hind end, right? Give them a butt, give them good quadriceps, to where they can handle that kind of abnormal strain, if you will. But again, like you said, it also comes down to how they're managed, their mental health, and their willingness to go and do those things for us.
I can definitely say, looking back from where I sit now to how things were and how I've thought about them when I was in it, when I was in the hunter-jumper world and doing it, a few things. One is that it's just considered normal that wear and tear happens. And I do think that's true. I mean, just like a car, yes, there is going to be our own selves. Yes, we age. There is wear and tear. There's, we can see the signs of what we've done in our lives, and that's normal. But I had no idea how much mentally caused tension, let's say, tension in the body that was there because of mental issues that's a huge piece of it. And yes, of course, it's the concussion of jumping, but that concussion is hugely amplified because the horses are not moving correctly, and they're not moving correctly because A, they don't know how, B, they may already be so far gone that they physically cannot. But it starts, with these green horses that are just driven around, miles put on them poorly, with their brain not really in it. So if the brain's kind of thinking one thing and they're fresh and woo, they're whatever, green fresh horse, and we go contain that with a bridle and riding gadgets, whether that's draw reins, side reins, whatever little gadgets you're into, or even if it's none of those and you're just packaging them together with your hands, let's say, you're creating the stress in their body that you're then later fighting against. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The concussion of jumping would be one thing, but it would be not nearly as bad if the horse were truly calm, free, loose. None of their joints can move like they want, like they should, like they could to their full potential if their head's not in it, So.
Yeah, and you saying that reminds me of something that I learned from Dr. Sandy Howlett. She is so amazing in how her brain can kind of sift through the particulars of psychology for a horse and a human, and how horses and humans interact. And I remember her saying one time that horses feel fear, not necessarily anxiety, because anxiety is an internal response to fear. So we humans do that all the time, right? We're always in our heads, and we're kind of creating these catastrophes for ourselves in situations that half the time, most of the time, don't even occur. But horses are so pure that they can build up this amount of fear, and then they're going to shut down when you take away their ability to express that. And they can shut down with a training regimen. They can shut down with gadgets, taking ways away for them to adapt and express, with imposing on them in a way that they can't get out of, that they can't express. So then they just shut down. So those are, kind of some loose concepts that you can take from the human world to the horse world. That is all a reaction to external circumstances that we may not have control over. And horses, for the most part, have no control. Domestic horses over. I also had a friend one time that said horses are kind of the. Did I say this last time? Horses are kind of like the prisoners, and we're kind of the prison guards, because we really do dictate their lives in such a way. So someone like you kind of comes in and looks at, again, what's best for the horse, what's going to get them in a mental state to where they're receptive to learning, as opposed to it being a fear thing or a freeze thing, by giving them no mode of expression, their displeasure, their discomfort, whatever.
Yeah, they just kind of become there,
Right.
They're not really engaged in the situation, and at the end of the day, if they're not mentally engaged, their body can only be so engaged, and then it's just
right.
sort of been shoved and dragged around. And gee, you mean there's wear and tear?
Right. Well, like you said last time, I just loved this. We were talking about like a horse that may have sustained an injury. Is it because they were disconnected that they had the injury, or the injury kind of created this disconnect between the mind and the body, arguably the spirit? And I think, like for any living creature, when they're disconnected like that, whether they're detached or they're avoidant or they're compartmentalizing because they have to survive, your body, not only are you more at risk for injury, but you're just not optimal, as you say.
Yeah, I like your prison guard thing. I think I definitely can say that I grew up and spent many years, basically, it was like that. It's that kind of arrangement. And I would have never, ever said that at the time, of course, because I loved horses. I've never not loved horses, even when I used things that I would now call abusive and did techniques that I would now call abusive. But that's what it's like. And at the time, the prison guard justifies whatever they need to do in the name of safety for humanity. And so when you come at it, like, when you're kind of just put in it, I don't think nobody comes at it like, I'm going to get a horse and treat it like a prison guard.
Right.
Nobody would say that. But like in my case, that was the culture I just entered into, and you don't really know that that's how you're doing it. It's like, yeah, you just go sit over here in your stall and behave. Don't you bang on that gate or kick the ball. And, you just behave over here. And when I'm ready to pull you out, you better behave then too. That's basically what we did.
Well, and you're right. Like we don't do better until we know better. And there's no judgment, by the way. We're not trying to. It's just, me working with horses, I've gotten a lot softer. I think we all make that evolution. We have all done things that we're not proud of. because we're humans and we make mistakes. But I think what's really cool about what we're both trying to do is bridge the gap to where there's some connection, there's some awareness, not only in the horse's body, but how we're interacting with the horse. And I know with your clients that you are kind of facilitating that. And hopefully, like what I'm doing is facilitating a horse that's more comfortable, so that there is a better interaction sometimes between the client and the horse. Yeah, and I do want to say again, the prison guard thing was not that was I used to have a really good friend on the East Coast who was a dentist, a very good dentist, and she really, I think, summed it up quite nicely there. What it's like to be a horse and live as a domesticated horse these days, sometimes is not great for them, even though we're doing the best that we can. We just don't know. But there's so much education out there, and there's, again, so much of a kind of a shift towards that connection. And I think that you can say this across the board, that if you're not somehow connected with yourself, you're not going to be with the horse either. Your relationships suffer, period. Any relation suffers when you don't really know yourself, and that disconnect just kind of permeates everything, but especially with our horses.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, certainly, I know in my situation, horses, I would have never, I shouldn't say it, because who knows? Who knows what would happen? But it feels like without horses, how would I have ever found my way to some of this, like, growth and self-development stuff,
Right.
If you go looking, it's easy to, for me anyway, it was easy to run into walls that you can't get around the prison guard way of keeping horses, and then I had to learn, this is another neat segue, then I had to learn how to, an alternative perhaps, instead of being a prison guard, an alternative is you could treat it like your horse is a little child. Okay, now not everyone is nice to little children, so that's their problem, but most people are patient and kind and would show, hold the hand of a little child and show them something that's very different than a prison guard trying to move a prisoner from one place to another.
Mm-hmm.
You can treat horses either way. You choose, and if you choose this one other path, you're going to learn some things. I say all the time, I could have never been a parent without, going down this rabbit hole of horsemanship first. My gosh, there's so many things that have happened between just life, so many things in life and becoming a parent and all the different phases that go along with that. Paisley just turned 5, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like horsemanship can show you everything if you let it, or you can just go be a prison guard and shove horses around all day. The choice is
right. And it reminds me too of Jim Masterson's philosophy. He just doesn't give the horse anything to brace against. And he, I think, would love for, and has encouraged this in his students, to go through life like that too. It's kind of a path of least resistance, but if you meet a brick wall with your own brick wall, you're not getting anywhere. Anyways, I just kind of thought of that because
that's great. I feel like that path of least resistance is natural for a horse, and it's not natural for us.
Totally.
Totally. If you let them and you don't just bully them and force them onto our way of doing everything, they will take you and show you how to have less resistance,
Totally.
Which serves everybody, really.
Well, they're amazing creatures for that because they're so in the moment. And then I'll also add in there too that, they also teach you boundaries. you know, this may be another rabbit hole, but you know, when I work on horses, sometimes occasionally I'll have owners that want to give treats to their horses throughout the session, and I just have to say, look, you know, that, well, first of all, that gets in the way of me reading the response of the horse, but second of all, sometimes I think it encourages horses to seek that reward for things that really and truly, you know, we kind of want them to do anyways on their own as a good citizen. And so what I find with folks that kind of excessively treat their horses is that they don't have great boundaries with the horse. You know, the horse is pushy and constantly nuzzling them and constantly looking for that, and they provide that as opposed to having more of a boundary there. Sometimes we get too emotionally connected with our horses, and so it's really that dance. It's a dance and it's a balance, mostly because you want to be safe, you know, and you don't need a 1,000-pound animal pushing their shoulder into you because they want a cookie for giving you their foot. You know, to me, that's a boundary that isn't okay with my own horse. But when I'm working on a horse, you know, I sometimes have to say, you know what, I need you to work on that because it's not my job to train your horse. You know, there's a certain level of cooperation that I need when I'm working on a horse. And I tell you, most of them pick it up right like that. They know I'm trying to help them. Or maybe it's because I have good clients. I rarely have a horse that is just running all over me and, you know, getting into my space and is crossing boundaries. But occasionally you find that, you know, you need to kind of set those boundaries in a kind way, but in a very direct way. And you know, you just ask that one time and things usually go okay after that. But, you know, like I said, it's just that fine line between, you know, having that compassion for the horse, right? And knowing that a lot of times they are in some discomfort and they're just trying to express that, but then also keeping yourself safe. So anyways, I thought I'd just throw that out there because I do deal with that sometimes, especially with folks that do a lot of clicker training, which I think can be very good for the horse, but sometimes it can also, you know, lead to some behaviors that as a body worker, when I'm trying to work on the horse, gets in the way of really helping the horse as much as I can.
Yeah, I will start by saying that I do use treats at times.
Right.
You know, I do it. I certainly don't do it with every horse. I have kind of developed my own way of where I choose to use it or not use it, and it is pretty specific. How I feel about it. I do think that there is a lot of people, and I probably was one of them when I first began to learn a little bit about clicker training and things. But there's a lot of people that are using clicker or positive reinforcement to avoid the mental discomfort of the horse.
Okay.
They're using it now. I can go down that side of it and say, well, clicker training or treat training, positive reinforcement, it is a good way to overwrite. You can't overwrite, but, you know, build in new responses and new associations to things that are negative. But then I think it's also easy to use it as a crutch and avoid discomfort. I've been down this avoiding discomfort road in many different departments, bits being one of them. But anyway, don't get me started on bits. We'll be here all day.
Well, that's the next one, maybe.
Yeah. You know, I do want to avoid unnecessary mental or physical discomfort, of course, you know, but I also know that there is, on some level, the biggest, most impactful changes that we make, both mentally and physically, are sometimes uncomfortable for a time. And so,
boy, that is so true. people in particular. You don't grow unless you have there's some discomfort there because it's a new way of thinking or it's a new way of going. Yeah, that doesn't feel good initially. You'd rather just revert back to what worked for you, but hey, it didn't actually really work for you because you're not growing. You're not getting stronger.
It's really easy to use something like clicker training as like, oh, that horse can't stand still. I'm going to teach it to stand still and reward it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Like logically,
Yeah.
when you say it that way, it makes sense. But it kind of overrides why can't they get still? It
Good
forces,
point.
doesn't force. Of course, we don't force our horse to do anything in clicker training, but in a way, you're forcing by distraction.
Yeah.
You're avoiding, forcing by distraction, whatever. You're not going there. You're not going to the hard place. They're not getting to the other side of the hard place, and so.
Right.
Certain horses, I feel like I have 2 horses that I use treats on, and I can pull it out and use them when I want, and I can put them away and not use them when I want, and that's
right.
For me. I've definitely come across horses, and I've experienced them and built them myself. Don't get me wrong. That if they're not doing clicker, they can't be cool. Now, I don't really have that problem now because now I understand the value of getting to the other side of that mental discomfort and finding the ability to be still inside their head, whether they're moving physically or not. If they can't be still inside their head, they can't stand still, and maybe then you do need to reward them for standing. But horses love standing. So ask yourself that. Why do I have to teach my horse to stand? What do they do out when they're being horses? They frickin' stand around,
Yeah.
If they can't do that, why? I think everyone should ask themselves that. They can learn how to get back to that. You don't need to do treats or you don't need to hobble them. I'm not saying that you should teach a horse to hobble. I'm all for it, but you know what I'm saying. They don't have to physically force or distract a horse into stillness. There's other ways to get there, and then when they get there in that way, gosh, all this other stuff just comes together. It's a miracle.
I love that.
And forget your sleep pouch. You don't have to end your day.
Right. Well, and I'm just saying all this is like as an observation that I have had doing bodywork on horses, and I've seen it really work. But I've also seen it, like I said, kind of get in the way. And I think that that's such a good connection you just made about stillness. And again, what's the root cause of why we can't stand still is a deeper question that if we can get to the root of that, we'll, like you said, move through some brick wall. To use the brick wall analogy. What I love about Masterson method too is that sometimes you get these really busy horses, these really anxious horses, and I see it a lot with off the track thoroughbreds, and they'll all of a sudden get internal and stand still. And it's like, yes, that's the connection that needed to be made in their nervous system just then. Just as another reason why I love Masterson talking about.
So funny. So you're like, yes, they're internal. Yes, he's inside his body, and they need to be because sometimes, especially off-track thoroughbred, might be very out of their body.
Right.
But they're on the trainer's side of things, that horses can get stuck there too.
Right. Yeah, so I bet.
If they go there, and that's not always a bad thing. Thank you for reminding me that it's not always a bad thing. But if your horse can only be in their body when they're totally uninterrupted and in the zone, you're not going to get very far in training. And I come across what I might call shutdown horses.
Right.
Horses that, they go inside and they kind of pretend to have a conversation with you, but they're not there. They are not there. And that, so
they're real stuck.
That's direction with it. It's interesting to remember that the good side of going inside. Yes, go inside. Feel process.
Yes.
And then wake back up and be present and responsive again,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, I can see how a very internal horse would just be, I think, again, I'm sorry, I'm making all this too about just people, but, you're stuck. If you're that kind of withdrawn, you're not moving. And there is that balance. And so for me in the body work, and for you as a trainer, again, it is about that individual horse. Do they need to be quieter in their system, or maybe they need to be more stimulated? Everyone talks about the parasympathetic, which is the rest, digest, feed part of your autonomic nervous system, that regulates things that you're not aware of, respiration, heartbeat, all of the actions of your internal organs. But some horses are too much in a parasympathetic. And what does that mean? Well, as an osteopath, for me, what I see then is they're usually hypothyroid. And I'm not trying to diagnose when I say that, but they may be an easy keeper. They're not metabolizing. They're not combusting as much in their energy, like I said, in their metabolism. And so that's not good either. There has to be this balance. And again, it really has to do with the horse that's in front of you and what that horse needs. Bodywork wise, training wise. Mm-hmm. How do we get them moving in a relaxed way? Not to the point where they can't move because they're too relaxed, but in a free way. That's the goal, I think, of what you do, of what I do, the combination of what we do together.
Yeah, accessing, being able to access power in their body without it being scary,
Yeah.
So, I'm going to try, after what you said, I'm going to try to use anxiety less, because boy, do I use that a lot about horses. So that's an interesting thing for me to think about, what you said about anxiety and fear. But anywho, different direction on that one.
Well, we have lots to talk about. We'll be doing this again.
Yeah. Yes. Well, where are we at? How are we doing?
Well, we've been almost chatting for an hour.
Oh yeah.
I
guess we should reel it in, huh?
Let's reel it in.
Okay, well, as usual, a fun chat.
Always fun.
Can't wait to see where our random decided topic takes us next.
Oh, they just go. It's just great.
Yeah. Much like our horsing journey. You just see where it takes
Love
you.
it.
See where it takes you.
Love it.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to find us on the interwebs, follow along, sign up for the newsletter, share with your friends, all that good stuff. We really appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time. Until then, happy horsing.